Hey everyone. So the 17th of Tammuz is rolling by again. And if you're like me, it's kind of an insignificant day. You fast on the 17th Tammuz. It kickstarts the whole 3 weeks of mourning, but it's not even like the most intense mourning period, right? The most intense mourning period comes during the 9 days of Av, right? So the first of Av is when that starts. So it's kind of like the little brother of Tisha B'Av. That's kind of how most of us think of the 17th of Tammuz. It's a fast day, but like the real fast day is the 9th of Av, like where we're leading up to it. This is just sort of like the beginning of the whole process. But what if I was to tell you this is a far more significant day than we're aware of? What if I was to tell you this wasn't just the little brother of the 9th of Av, but this is the grandfather of the 9th of Av? And what if I was to tell you this wasn't the beginning of a mourning process, but it was actually supposed to be the end of a much greater process? And that is the true meaning of the day. And I think you'll notice too that we call it the 17th of Tammuz, and it doesn't really have another name, right? All of our other holidays have great names. We've got Sukkot, we've got Shavuot, but the 17th of Tammuz is just the date. It should have been on equal footing with many other holidays. And let's see why. So the context is the Hebrews saw God's hand as they were freed in a miraculous series of events, including the splitting of the Red Sea. The Hebrews arrived at Mount Sinai and heard the voice of God descending. Moses ascends the mountain for 40 days to receive the greatest prophecy in history and descends to gift the world with two tablets. So this process, we were leading up to it. We've got the Omer that we're counting, we've got Shavuot, and then we're waiting for 40 days. And the process is about to end. Moses goes up the mountain. We celebrate the day that he goes up the mountain. We celebrate the day that we met God at the mountain. And then Moses is supposed to come down. This is the end of this process. So it should have been one of the most glorious days in all of history. Instead, Moses descends to see the sin of the golden calf. He descended with two tablets, written on both sides by God himself, which Moses destroyed. Moses, however, also descended and was much more valuable, so all was not lost. And what does God say to Moses? And now leave me. My wrath shall grow against them. I shall devour them, and I shall make you into a great nation. It's like he's reneging on his promise with Abraham, but he's not. He's saying, no, I'm going to keep my promise with Abraham, but it's going to be from you. Like, you're going to be the next father. I'm going to get rid of all of these people. And so Moses goes down and sees the situation, deals with everything. And then he comes back to God and he says, please, this people sinned a great sin and made for themselves a golden god. And now, could you overlook their sin? Now, meaning after what I've done. So we'll see what he's done. And if not, erase me, please, from the book that you have written. So he doesn't want to have any of it. Moses says, no, 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 you're not making a new nation for me. Erase me from your book. Like, if you want to erase this people, I'm not going to play a part in starting a new nation. So Moses is sacrificing himself for the Jewish people here. God commanded us to build the temple as a rectification for this sin. This means that the temple should never have existed. The sequence of events played out in a way to show us why the temple is needed as a commandment. This sequence also led to Yom Kippur and Sukkot, right? Yom Kippur is the day we got forgiveness from this sin, and Sukkot is the day that this forgiveness was revealed in the world. We got the clouds back, and so these two holidays, and one of them is a Yom Tov, it's a Chag. Sukkot, it's a regel, right? The temple is just such a central part of the Israeli nation, and Sukkot is one of the three major holidays. Well, what if this was a hidden holiday? This was the actual real holiday that should have been, but instead it was shattered and divided up into many other commandments in order to restore what this day should have been. So we have a need to feel God's presence, and we should have been able to fill this need ourselves. We should have been able to fill it without having to project it onto some outside source. And, this is kind of recent in psychology. We have Jean Piaget. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It's called object permanence. It's the knowledge that an object or person still exists, even when they're hidden and you can't see or hear them. And so what happened was on this day, with all of this miraculous thunder, right, we saw God, But then God kind of vanished. Moses kind of vanished, and we had nothing. And we didn't have the sense that there is an object permanence, that God is the essential reality. God is the essential permanence. And it's not something that happened then, it's something that happens every day in our lives. We don't feel God's presence. We can even forget that God is present. And this is kind of the sin, and we're repeating the sin every time we forget God's presence. With the temple, instead of projecting our need onto an idol, right? A lot of people have little idols in their houses and things throughout all of history. They have big idols, and the idols are there to remind them that something omnipotent, something greater than themselves is present. And so we have the mitzvot. And the mitzvot, like the temple, allow us to accept God's presence instead of projecting it onto an object. It reminds us of his presence without replacing him. And so what does God say when he gives the command? And create for me a mikdash, and I shall dwell within them. He doesn't say, make for me a mikdash, and I shall dwell within the mikdash. The mikdash isn't so God's presence can be in the mikdash. The mikdash is so God's presence can be in us, in the world. So let's take a little bit of an aside and talk about sota. So sota is this law that's later given in the Torah. If a husband believes that his wife committed adultery, she shall be brought before the priest at the temple. The man brings barley flour for a meal offering because of the jealousy. The Kohen places earth from the Mishkan into an earthen vessel of holy water. The woman must uncover her hair and hold the meal offering in her hands. The priest will write a conditional curse on a scroll and dissolve it in the water. The woman then drinks the water, and the priest burns the meal offering. If the woman is guilty, as written on the scroll, her belly will swell and her thigh will drop, and she shall live out her days cursed. So some kind of physical change happens to her, and she doesn't die, but she's cursed her whole life. Everyone sees she was a transgressor. She was an adulterer. And if the woman is not guilty, she shall be absolved in the eyes of her husband and bear seed. So she's going to have a child. It's a ritual where, today we have the DNA test. If you see, or if you think your wife has been cheating, you've got cameras, you've got all these other ways to figure it out. But back then you didn't have ways to figure it out, and it would cause great strife in the marriage. And the misbelief that, the child might not be yours if she got pregnant from it, it would cause a lot of problems. And so we needed some kind of ritual in order to bring peace back to the home. So God is related as like a husband for Israel, and the meeting with God at Mount Sinai on Shavuot is like our wedding. So here we have in Ezekiel just a couple of examples. There's plenty of examples of this. I passed over you and enlightened, and here with you as lovers. I spread my wings over you and covered your nakedness, and made a promise of a covenant with you, which is like a marriage contract. Pronounced God, you shall be mine. And here we have another one in Jeremiah. Jeremiah actually talks about this a few times. Pronounce God, the house of Israel betrays as a wife betrays her betrothed. So this ritual of sota needs to come and help us out here to sort of restore the love in the house, the peace in the house between the husband and the wife, which is in this case God and Israel. So what happens? This is when Moses goes down the mountain before he goes back to God and says, erase me from the book. Moses burns and grinds the golden calf in fire and dissolves it in water and made the people drink. He also has about 3,000 people executed. And when he goes back up the mountain and God has to answer him, God says, whoever has sinned against me shall be erased from my book. So we don't really even know who the actual sinners were. We have speculation in the Talmud. Some say it was the heir of Rav. We don't really know who, because they've been erased. We don't have any information about the ones who actually did sin. But they were within Israel, and Israel is one house, one people, and we are all responsible for each other. And this is not something that should have happened. Like it's a big shame for all of us. We all didn't see God. Some people get up and actually take action from the talk, but everyone else is a little bit complicit in the talk, right? We all talk the talk. We all thought God isn't with us. We had that doubt. So why wasn't Aaron punished for what happened? He was the chief organizer, right? He's the one who asked them all to give them the gold and he would melt it down. He made the golden calf. Like he participated in the crime. Why didn't anything happen to him? So Aaron and his children became the priests of the temple. So we see that they're to forever rectify this sin, right? They were the spiritual leader who guided the people down to the sin. So now to rectify it, they are the spiritual leader who will work to bring God's presence into the world. They are the ones who dedicate their lives to the temple. Okay, rectify it, but what about the punishment? He wasn't wiped from the book. He plays a pivotal role in the rest of the Torah. We see his name several times, and he wasn't put to the sword. Somehow, maybe, Aaron didn't sin against God. So when Aaron is first introduced in his role to Moses, God says, and he, Aaron, shall speak for you to the people. He was and shall be a mouth for you, and you shall be as a God to him. Wow. Like you shall be to him kind of what I am to you is what God is saying. And so Aaron was a spokesperson for Moses, not for God. His actions avoided a civil war, which is something that we can clearly see in the text, and took a path of mediation, right? Making the best from a bad situation until Moses would return. So this is kind of how we understand it, kind of how we explain it, is that he was facing an impossible situation and he guided it down a path where if left to its own devices, it would have been a lot worse. So what does the text say? And Moses saw the people, for they were animalistic, because Aaron had set them loose, as they hold contempt for those who oppose them. So if Aaron would have straight up opposed them, they would have held contempt for him, and there would have been some kind of civil war. Aaron might have been killed, might have been overthrown. So the pathway that Aaron chose, Aaron saw the way that things would play out was just making the best of a bad situation. He was a leader for the people, the best way he knew how to be, and he didn't actually partake in the sin. He actually did something that was kind of good in the eyes of history. And this is what we're presupposing by the fact that he wasn't even mentioned, he wasn't even punished. In fact, he was rewarded and given a central role in the Jewish people, him and his descendants, for all time. So we can look at the theme of the 17th of Tammuz, what happened on that day in pre-exile history. A lot of bad things as well happened after we were in exile. Moses broke the tablets upon seeing the golden calf. So during the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem, the temple ran out of sheep for daily sacrifice. So again, connected to the temple. Apostamos burned the Torah. Again, this is kind of like the tablets being broken. An idol was placed in the temple. So the same theme, the idol and the temple. The walls of Jerusalem were breached by the Babylonians, and the walls of Jerusalem were breached by the Romans. Now, one of these definitely happened, and the sages in the Talmud say that this is actually both walls were breached. Rather than destroy the Jewish people, it was the temple that was destroyed. The 17th of Tammuz became a fast day, kicking off the beginning of this destruction to commemorate the cause of this ordeal. But it actually should have been the end to a much different process. It's like there's a beautiful holiday with a special name like Sukkot and Shavuot in the heavens that was supposed to descend. We were supposed to receive a holiday for all time. The 17th of Tammuz should not have been a mourning day. It should have been one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all holidays, where we finally received Moses after he went up to the mountain and we received the tablets that God wrote. But instead of becoming the end to an epic process, it became the beginning to a process of mourning. So there's a hidden secret holiday that we don't have. I mean, a lot of the secrets we have for Passover come from, what do we do on Passover? Oh, we do this, right? A lot of the secrets on all of these days come from the day itself and how the day is celebrated and how the day is kept. The 17th of Tammuz, we never received that holiday. We never received the inner secrets of this day. And it doesn't mean those secrets don't exist. Those secrets exist. We just don't have a key or a door for that key to unlock. So there's a lot more depth to this day than we'll ever be able to reveal on our own. The 17th of Tammuz should have been one of the greatest and most majestic days in history. It is only because of this potential that the day holds such an eternal disgrace. The temple is the solution to this disgrace. Israel's survival is because Moses was willing to sacrifice himself before God, and God was willing to sacrifice his temple instead of the Jewish people. It's a lesson that the commandments come to rectify our characters. Their beauty and greatness is because of our flaws and depravity. We only have the temple, this great temple. We have a sense of God's presence in the world because of this sin. And this shows us that a lot of the commandments, sure, they may not have come after a sin to rectify the sin. A lot of them came before. So the commandments are actually a way to rectify our characters. And we all want divine assistance in our lives. We all want guidance. We all pray for God, please send me a sign, right? It's this very cheesy trope, but we want God to help us. We pray to God. But when it comes time to receive this blessing, when it comes time to receive it, we reject it. And so why would God ever give us tablets? Why would God ever give us any of his light if all we'll do when we get it is just reject it? We won't even receive it. So part of the work we see on the 17th of Tammuz is that we really have to work in order to be a proper vessel, a proper receptacle for God's light. That was the sin. We weren't a proper receptacle. Every disaster is the rejection of the divine light because we did not properly develop our ability to be a vessel to receive that light. So here I've got kind of like a cheesy ending. I can't really end it with anything because this day holds such deep secrets that we'll never know. So the only thing we can really do is fast and mourn it and hope that things change for us. Hope that we can rectify this in the future someday because we're still paying for it. So may we merit to have the temple rebuilt speedily in our days. The sages say that every generation that the temple isn't rebuilt is as if the generation caused its destruction. So, the rebuilding of the temple is just a symbol that we merited to have that temple rebuilt. And so what we really want to focus on is not rebuilding the temple. Let's forcefully do it. What we really need to focus on is building that vessel, is that we merit to have it rebuilt. Yes, it will be rebuilt, but that's not the point. We need to rebuild that merit. And may we merit to celebrate the 17th of Tammuz rather than mourn it, right? One day, hopefully, the 17th of Tammuz could be restored to what it really was. And may we merit to receive the light rather than fill our vessel with depravity. And this goes for any day, right? Every day is a potential blessing or curse, a potential disaster. And the disaster only comes because we're not who we should be. And we're not ready to receive that light. So yeah, let's take this lesson not only on this fasting day, let's take this lesson every day in our lives. Anyways, I hope everyone has a very meaningful fast this year and have a good one.